My name is Zephyra, and at 30 years old, I finally understand what it means to be the disappointing daughter. Growing up in Savannah, Georgia, I always lived in the shadow of my perfect sister, Jasmine. For years, I endured my parents' emotional manipulation as they made it clear who their favorite was. Now, as I prepare to marry Logan, I never expected my wedding day would be when everyone would finally see the truth about my golden child sister. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever felt overshadowed by someone in your family. I grew up in a charming neighborhood in Savannah, Georgia, where Spanish moss draped over oak trees and the air smelled like jasmine and sweet tea. Our middle-class family lived in a colonial-style home with a wraparound porch where my parents hosted neighborhood gatherings. From the outside, we looked picture perfect, but inside those walls, I learned early what it meant to never quite measure up. My father, William, was an accountant with a stern demeanor and even stricter expectations. He valued financial stability above all else and believed success could only be measured in prestigious careers and practical achievements. His gray suits matched his outlook on life, structured conventional, and without room for creative interpretation. My mother, Diana, was a former beauty queen who still kept her crown displayed in the living room cabinet. She measured worth through appearance and social connections. The daughter of wealthy landowners, she had married my father for stability rather than passion, and she carried her disappointment about her own life choices into her parenting. Then there was my sister Jasmine, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always miles ahead in our parents' eyes. She was the kind of child adults adored, polite, precocious, and eager to please. With her honey blonde hair and natural grace, she resembled our mother, while I took after my father's side with darker features and an angular face. Jasmine seemed to absorb knowledge effortlessly, bringing home perfect report cards that went straight to the refrigerator door, while my B-pluses were met with questions about what went wrong. My earliest memory of feeling less than came when I was just 6 years old. Jasmine, at 4, was already reading simple books, sounding out words while our parents watched with undisguised pride. She might skip a grade, my mother told anyone who would listen. When I pointed out that I could draw pictures that looked like real things, my father patted my head absently. "That's nice, honey. A cute hobby." Art became my sanctuary. While Jasmine played soccer and joined the junior debate team and took piano lessons, I lost myself in colors and shapes. I could spend hours with just a pencil and paper creating worlds that made sense to me when the real one didn't. My fifth-grade art teacher, Mrs. Santiago, was the first adult who seemed to see something special in me. "You have a unique perspective, Zephyra," she told me the first time anyone had described something about me as unique without making it sound like a flaw. When I was 8, I created a mixed-media collage that won first place in the district art show. The ceremony was scheduled for a Tuesday evening at 7. That same evening, Jasmine had a soccer game at 6:30. There was never any question about which event my parents would attend. "Your sister needs our support," my mother explained. "The whole team counts on her. You understand, right?" I nodded because that's what I always did. Understanding, accommodating, disappearing. My grandparents attended the ceremony instead, clapping loudly when I received my blue ribbon. "Your parents would be so proud," my grandmother said, and even at 8, I recognized the lie. Later, my ribbon joined other forgotten items in my desk drawer while Jasmine's participation trophies claimed prominent spots on the living room shelves. I tried everything to win their approval. I joined the school choir, attempted softball, even entered the science fair with a project about how different paints react to sunlight. Nothing stuck. Nothing impressed. I wasn't bad at these activities, just not exceptional, and in our house, being average was the same as failing. My father had nicknames for us that said everything about his expectations. Jasmine was his golden child, said, with a proud beam. I was his dreamer, the word carrying the weight of his disappointment. "Got your head in the clouds again, dreamer?" he'd ask whenever he caught me sketching. The nickname stuck like a burr, a constant reminder that dreams weren't valued in a household that prioritized practical achievements. By the time I was 12, I had internalized the family narrative so completely that I stopped bringing friends home. I couldn't bear for them to witness the stark difference in how my parents treated their 2 daughters. At Jasmine's basketball games, they cheered from the stands. At my art club exhibitions, they showed up late, if at all, offering distracted compliments while checking their watches. "You're just different," my mother would say when I asked why they never seemed interested in my activities. "Jasmine is more like us." Those 4 words contained volumes I didn't fit. I wasn't what they wanted. I would always be the odd one out in my own family. Christmas mornings told the same story. While Jasmine unwrapped new sports equipment, electronic gadgets, and clothes from the popular stores, I received generic art supplies and practical items. One year at 13, I overheard my mother telling my father, "I never know what to get her. She's just not like normal girls." The harder I tried to win their approval, the more it seemed to slip away. Meanwhile, Jasmine thrived under their attention, becoming more accomplished, more confident, more golden with every passing year. Our childhood became a study in contrasts, Jasmine ascending, while I remained firmly on the ground looking up at her shine. High school should have been a fresh start, but instead the patterns from childhood only intensified. Jasmine entered as a freshman when I was a junior, and within weeks she had eclipsed me completely. She joined the track team and broke school records. She campaigned for class president and won by a landslide. She maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while participating in more extracurricular activities than seemed humanly possible. Meanwhile, I retreated further into my art. The art room became my sanctuary during lunch periods and after school. Mr. Abernathy, the art teacher, gave me permission to use the facilities whenever I wanted, recognizing something in my work that no one else seemed to see. Under his guidance, my style evolved from technical precision to something more abstract and emotionally raw. "Your work has soul, Zephyrah," he told me one afternoon as I worked on a series of charcoal drawings exploring the concept of invisibility. "Not everyone will understand it, but those who do will be deeply moved." His words sustained me through the increasingly difficult days at home. My junior year, I won a regional art competition that included students from 5 states. The prize came with a small scholarship and publication in an arts magazine. When I brought the news home, my mother was on the phone discussing Jasmine's upcoming track meet. "That's nice, honey," she said, covering the receiver briefly. "We'll talk about it later." Later never came. That weekend, Jasmine broke the school record for the 400-meter dash, and our house filled with relatives celebrating her achievement. My competition certificate remained in my backpack, eventually crumpling under the weight of textbooks. The contrast between our lives became even more pronounced during our respective college application processes. I applied to several art schools, including a prestigious program that offered me a substantial scholarship based on my portfolio. My parents' response was tepid at best. "Art school?" my father asked, frowning over his reading glasses. "What kind of career will that lead to? Wouldn't you rather apply to State University? They have a good business program." When Jasmine received her acceptance letter from Cornell University a year later, my parents threw a party. Relatives, neighbors, and family friends gathered in our backyard to celebrate the golden child's latest achievement. My father made a toast, his voice thick with emotion. "We always knew Jasmine was destined for greatness," he said, raising his glass while my mother wiped away proud tears. My graduation dinner, held at a local restaurant, somehow transformed into a celebration of Jasmine's upcoming Ivy League adventure. Relatives asked me perfunctory questions about my plans before turning eagerly to Jasmine for details about Cornell. By dessert, I had become nearly invisible, pushing cheesecake around my plate while conversation flowed around and past me. The summer after my graduation, tensions at home reached a breaking point. My mother found me crying in my room after a particularly difficult family dinner where my father had spent 20 minutes lecturing me on the impracticality of an arts career. "Maybe we should see someone," she suggested, looking uncomfortable. "A family therapist might help us communicate better." I agreed, hopeful that a professional might help my parents see the damage their favoritism had caused. Dr. Patterson met with us for 6 sessions in his beige office with its uncomfortable chairs and generic landscape paintings. He asked questions and nodded thoughtfully at our answers, but ultimately his assessment cut deep. "Zephyrah seems to have some sensitivity issues," he told my parents while I sat right there. "Some children just need more validation than others. I suggest you continue encouraging Jasmine's achievements while helping Zephyrah develop a thicker skin and more practical goals." My parents nodded in agreement, vindicated in their approach. On the drive home, my father said, "See, you just need to try harder to fit in." What neither they nor Dr. Patterson understood was that I had been trying my entire life. There was simply no room in our family narrative for who I actually was. While Jasmine presented as perfect to the outside world, I occasionally glimpsed cracks in her golden facade at home. Small moments when the mask slipped the way she snapped at our mother when no one else was around, her occasional cruel comments disguised as helpful advice, the competitive gleam in her eye when attention shifted briefly to me. Once I overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing about how easy it was to maintain her perfect image. "They're so desperate to see what they want to see," she said, not realizing I was passing by her bedroom door. "It's almost too easy." Another time I caught her changing a B+ to an A on a chemistry test before showing it to our parents. When our eyes met, she simply shrugged. "They expect straight A's," she said, "so I give them straight A's." I kept these observations to myself, unsure if they represented genuine cracks in her perfect veneer, or if I was just seeing what I wanted to see out of jealousy. The final straw came one evening when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen, thinking everyone else was asleep. "At least we got lucky with one daughter," my father said with a sigh. "Zephira just needs to find her way," my mother responded, but her tone lacked conviction. "She's 20 years old and still drawing pictures," my father countered. "Jasmine is already on a clear path to success." Their words confirmed what I had always suspected, but hoped wasn't true in their eyes. I was the disappointing daughter, the failure, the one who would never measure up. 2 weeks later, I packed my car and left for college with a mixture of heartbreak and relief. As I hugged my parents goodbye, my father squeezed my shoulder and delivered what he probably thought was encouragement. "Try to make us proud," he said. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I drove away with those words echoing in my ears, determined that somehow, someday, I would find people who would accept me for exactly who I was. College was like stepping into a parallel universe where everything I had been told about myself suddenly seemed false. In the diverse ecosystem of the art department, I wasn't weird or impractical. I was just another creative person, among many each with our own unique vision. For the first time in my life, I found myself surrounded by people who spoke my language. My roommate Talia was a photography major who covered our shared wall with black and white prints, capturing seemingly ordinary moments with extraordinary perspective. Down the hall, Marcus created digital animations that blended technology with traditional drawing techniques. In our shared studios, Devin worked with metal sculptures, while Aiko specialized in traditional Japanese ink painting. None of them seemed concerned about practical career paths or meeting conventional expectations. They created art because they couldn't imagine doing anything else. Gradually, I stopped hearing my father's voice in my head, questioning every choice I made. Professor Harris became the mentor I had always craved. A successful artist in her own right, with gallery representation in New York and Chicago, she saw potential in my work that I had barely recognized myself. "You have a distinctive voice, Zephira," she told me during my first portfolio review. "Your use of negative space speaks volumes about absence and longing. Have you considered developing this theme further?" Under her guidance, my technique improved, but more importantly, my confidence grew. I stopped apologizing for my art. I stopped qualifying my career choice with, "but I might minor in business." I embraced my identity as an artist fully and without reservation. My junior year, Professor Harris selected me and 2 other students to participate in the department's prestigious annual exhibition. For weeks, I worked on a series exploring family dynamics through abstract compositions of interconnected and disconnected forms. The centerpiece was a large-scale mixed-media piece titled Golden, featuring a dominant gold form overshadowing a smaller, more complex structure rendered in muted tones. The opening night of the exhibition fell on a Friday. I sent my parents an invitation 3 weeks in advance, even calling to follow up. "We'll try," my mother said vaguely. "Your father has a conference that weekend and Jasmine has an important internship interview." I pretended not to be disappointed when they didn't show. Instead, I focused on the small crowd gathering around my work on Professor Harris, introducing me to gallery owners and local artists on the red-soled sticker, placed next to golden, halfway through the evening. Later that night, as my friends and I celebrated at a local restaurant, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Jasmine got the internship at Morgan Stanley, so proud of her accomplishment. Hope your art thing went well. I put my phone away without responding and ordered another round of drinks for the table. This was my night, my achievement, and I refused to let their absence or indifference diminish it. Meanwhile, Jasmine's carefully curated social media portrayed the perfect Ivy League experience. Her Instagram featured professional quality photos of her studying in Gothic libraries, attending prestigious lectures, participating in charity events, and socializing with well-dressed peers at exclusive campus functions. Each post garnered dozens of admiring comments from our extended family and high school friends. Our parents shared her posts religiously, adding captions like, "Our brilliant daughter making us proud," and "Excellence runs in the family." They rarely shared my occasional posts about art exhibitions or studio work, and when they did, the captions were notably more restrained: "Zafira's latest project," or simply, "Art show." After graduation, I made the decision to move to Chicago. The city's vibrant art scene and lower cost of living compared to New York made it an ideal place to launch my career. I found a tiny apartment in Wicker Park that doubled as a studio and took a job waitressing at a gallery cafe to pay the bills. The first year was hard. I worked double shifts, took commission work designing logos and illustrations for local businesses, and spent every free moment building my portfolio. My parents called occasionally conversations that invariably turned to Jasmine's latest accomplishments at her entry-level position at a prestigious financial firm. She might be promoted to junior analyst by the end of the year, my father reported proudly during one call. At this rate, she could make vice president before she's 30. "That's great," I replied automatically. "I sold 2 pieces at a local art fair last weekend." "Oh, that's nice, honey. How much did they pay for those?" When I told him, he made a non-committal sound. "Well, it's a start, I suppose. Have you thought any more about getting a stable job with benefits?" I changed the subject and the pattern continued. Every accomplishment of mine was measured against Jasmine's and found wanting. Every step forward in my career was met with practical concerns about healthcare and retirement plans. Everything changed the night I met Logan. I was working a private event at the gallery serving wine and appetizers to well-dressed patrons viewing a new exhibition. Logan wasn't like the other attendees. Where they clustered in tight social groups, air-kissing and name-dropping, he moved thoughtfully from piece to piece, spending time with each work, actually seeing it. When he reached the back wall where 3 of my pieces had been included in the group show, he stopped for so long that I grew curious. I approached with a tray of champagne, using it as an excuse to hear his thoughts. "These are extraordinary," he said, gesturing to my abstract explorations of family relationships. The tension between connection and isolation. I've never seen it expressed quite this way before. He introduced himself as Logan Matheson, an architectural designer whose firm had recently opened a Chicago office. We talked for nearly an hour about art and architecture, about the conversation between form and function, about the way creative expression shapes our understanding of the world. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers, and I had a date for the following weekend. Logan came from a wealthy family. His father owned a successful construction company that had evolved into an architectural firm, but he wore his privilege lightly. He was ambitious, but not cutthroat successful, but not defined by conventional metrics of achievement. Most importantly, he saw me, really saw me in a way my family never had. When I finally introduced him to my parents 6 months into our relationship, the contrast between how they treated me versus how Logan's family treated me became painfully clear. Logan's parents had welcomed me unreservedly from our first meeting. His mother, Patricia, asked thoughtful questions about my artistic process and proudly displayed a small painting I had given them in their living room. His father, Robert, though not particularly art-savvy, made genuine efforts to understand my work and regularly sent me articles about artists he thought might interest me. My parents, by contrast, spent most of our dinner together questioning Logan about his career prospects and family connections, making only perfunctory inquiries about my recent gallery showing. When Jasmine called during dessert to share news about her promotion, My mother put her on speakerphone so everyone could congratulate her, effectively hijacking the remainder of the evening. In the car afterward, Logan took my hand. "Is it always like that?" he asked quietly. "Pretty much my entire life," I admitted. He shook his head. "They have no idea what they're missing by not seeing how extraordinary you are." As my success in the Chicago art scene gradually grew, my visits home became increasingly strained. Each trip reinforced the fundamental truth that had shaped my childhood. In my parents' eyes, I would always be measured against Jasmine and found wanting. Even as galleries began representing my work, even as local arts publications featured my exhibitions, even as my income from art finally allowed me to quit waitressing, nothing seemed to shift their perception. I remained the dreamer, the impractical one, the disappointment, while Jasmine continued to be the golden child whose conventional achievements they could easily understand and celebrate. The irony was that as my professional confidence grew, I found myself less and less concerned with their approval. Logan's unwavering support, combined with the validation from the art world and my own growing sense of self-worth, created a foundation that my parents' indifference could no longer shake. By the time Logan proposed at the opening of my first solo exhibition, I had built a life that felt authentic and fulfilling. Standing amid my work surrounded by friends and colleagues who valued my vision, I looked at the man kneeling before me and knew with absolute certainty that I had found my home. "Yes," I said as the gallery erupted in applause. "Absolutely yes." Logan proposed with his grandmother's vintage emerald ring, redesigned by a local jeweler to suit my taste. The moment was perfect, intimate yet public, surrounded by my art and the community that had embraced me. My first call afterward should have been to my parents, but I hesitated, already anticipating their response. When I finally did call the next morning, my mother's first question was, "Is he from that wealthy family you mentioned, the architects?" "Yes, Mom, but that's not why I'm marrying him," I replied, already feeling defensive. "I'm marrying him because we love each other and he supports my work." "Of course, dear," she said in a tone that suggested she knew better. "Well, it's wonderful news. Have you told Jasmine yet? She's been seeing someone from her firm, a senior vice president." Just like that, my engagement became a launching pad to discuss Jasmine's love life. The pattern was so familiar that I almost laughed. Almost. When we began wedding planning, I naively hoped that my mother might see it as an opportunity to connect with me. Instead, it became a battlefield where every decision became a referendum on my choices versus what Jasmine would have done. "Jasmine would look stunning in a classic ball gown," my mother mused during our first discussion about wedding dresses. "With your figure, you might want something more structured." "I'm thinking of a garden ceremony," I told her. "Something artistic and intimate." "The country club would be more appropriate," she countered. "Jasmine's boyfriend's sister had her wedding there. 600 guests and a 12-piece orchestra." Logan and I wanted a wedding that reflected our values and aesthetics, creative, personal, and meaningful, rather than showy or conventional. We found a beautiful converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and massive windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. We planned to feature work by artist friends as decoration and hired a local jazz quartet instead of a traditional wedding band. Every decision was a struggle. My mother pushed for formal engraved invitations, while I preferred letterpress designs created by a printmaker friend. She advocated for a traditional multi-tiered cake, while Logan and I wanted a dessert table featuring treats from our favorite local bakeries. She suggested a sit-down dinner with beef or chicken options. We envisioned food stations highlighting cuisines from places we had traveled together. "I just don't understand why you have to make everything so complicated," she complained during one particularly tense phone call. "There are traditions for a reason, Zephyrah." Despite my reservations, I asked Jasmine to be my maid of honor. Part of me hoped that planning my wedding might bring us closer, healing the rift that had grown between us since childhood. Another part, if I'm being honest, feared the family fallout if I chose someone else. Jasmine accepted with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "Of course, Zeph, I'd be honored," she gushed over the phone. "I have so many ideas for your bachelorette party and bridal shower. Leave everything to me." Her sudden interest in my life should have raised red flags, but I was so desperate for family connection that I ignored my misgivings. She began calling daily with suggestions and questions, inserting herself into every aspect of the planning process. "I've created a Pinterest board for you," she announced one evening. "I know you have your artistic tastes, but I've pinned some really beautiful traditional options that would photograph better." When I gently explained that Logan and I had already settled on our aesthetic, she sighed dramatically. "I'm just trying to help you not embarrass yourself, Zeph. This wedding is going to be seen by a lot of important people in Logan's circle." Her help often felt more like sabotage. When she volunteered to handle the guest list and RSVPs, I agreed with reluctance. 3 weeks before the wedding, I discovered she had accidentally forgotten to mail invitations to several of my artist friends, claiming she thought they were just work acquaintances. The wedding dress shopping experience perfectly encapsulated our family dynamic. My mother Jasmine and I visited an upscale boutique in downtown Chicago. I had researched designers and had a clear vision of what I wanted: something simple, elegant, with architectural details and clean lines. My mother and Jasmine had other ideas. They pulled frothy ball gowns with enormous skirts, dresses dripping with crystals and pearls, styles that might have suited Jasmine's classic beauty but made me feel like I was wearing a costume. "This is exactly what I would choose," Jasmine sighed, holding up a princess-style gown with a sweetheart neckline. "You'd look just like a fairy tale bride." "But I want to look like me," I insisted, turning instead to a sleek sheath dress with a modern silhouette and subtle beaded detail. My mother frowned. "It's so plain, Zephyra. Don't you want something more special for your big day?" "This feels special to me," I replied, admiring the way the dress complemented my frame instead of overwhelming it. "I suppose it suits your artistic sensibility," my mother conceded with a tight smile that conveyed her disapproval. I bought the dress I loved, but the victory felt hollow. Even on this most personal of choices, I couldn't escape the subtext Jasmine would have chosen better. Logan witnessed these dynamics firsthand during the wedding planning process. After a particularly difficult dinner with my parents, where they spent 20 minutes praising Jasmine's event planning skills while criticizing our menu choices, he finally spoke up. "I notice a pattern in how you talk to and about Zephyra," he said calmly but firmly. "Have you considered how it might feel to constantly be compared to her sister and found lacking?" My father bristled. "We're just trying to help her make the best choices. Jasmine has a natural talent for these things." "Zephyra has extraordinary talents of her own," Logan countered. "She's a successful artist whose work is now in private collections across the country. She's creative, compassionate, and authentic, qualities I value enormously. I'm not sure why those accomplishments don't seem to register with you." An uncomfortable silence followed. My mother recovered first. "Of course we're proud of Zephyra," she said without conviction. "We just want her wedding to be perfect." "I want it to be authentically ours," I interjected, finding courage in Logan's support. "That matters more to me than some generic version of perfection." The conversation moved on, but I caught my father watching Logan with newfound respect and perhaps a glimmer of self-awareness. Logan's parents noticed the favoritism too. After meeting my family at an engagement dinner, Patricia pulled me aside. "Families can be complicated," she said gently. "Just know that we think you're wonderful exactly as you are. We couldn't be happier that you're joining our family." Her simple acceptance brought tears to my eyes. This was how family was supposed to feel: supportive, accepting, loving without conditions. As the wedding approached, tensions escalated. My mother pushed for an elaborate rehearsal dinner at the country club where Jasmine was a member. Logan and I preferred a small gathering at our favorite restaurant, a cozy farm-to-table place where the chef had agreed to create a special menu for us. "But the country club has prestige," my mother argued. "People expect a certain level of sophistication." "We're not trying to impress people," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "We want to create a meaningful experience in a place that matters to us." In the end, we held firm on the restaurant. My small victory felt significant, a declaration that this wedding would reflect who we truly were, not who my parents wished we would be. The week before our wedding, Jasmine arrived from New York with 4 massive suitcases for a 3-day stay. She immediately took over the guest room in our apartment, spreading her belongings everywhere and rearranging the furniture to create better energy flow. This was my first clue that the coming days would test my patience in ways I hadn't anticipated. "I hope you don't mind," she said breezily, placing a framed photo of herself on the nightstand. "I just need to make the space feel like home." From the moment she arrived, Jasmine found subtle ways to criticize our wedding choices. Nothing was direct enough to justify confrontation, but the cumulative effect was maddening. "Oh, you're using wildflowers for the centerpieces. That's unique. I would have gone with classic roses, but this has a certain rustic charm. Your venue is certainly industrial. I suppose that goes with the whole artistic vibe you're going for. This dress is perfect for you. Not everyone could pull off something so understated." Each comment came with a smile and a tone that suggested she was being helpful rather than critical. But the subtext was clear. My choices weren't quite good enough, not quite up to her standards. Logan, bless him, ran interference whenever possible. "Actually, we chose wildflowers because they're sustainable and support local growers," he would interject smoothly. Or, "The venue was featured in Architectural Digest last year for its innovative design." His calm corrections often left Jasmine momentarily speechless, forced to regroup before launching her next subtle attack. The rehearsal dinner should have been a warm, intimate gathering of our closest friends and family. Instead, it became the Jasmine show. As maid of honor, she insisted on giving a speech, despite my preference for a more informal evening without structured toasts. "I've been planning this for months," she said with a wounded expression when I suggested we skip speeches. "Don't you want me to share my thoughts as your only sister?" Reluctantly, I agreed. Her speech started innocuously enough with childhood anecdotes that painted her as my protector and guide, but it quickly evolved into something else entirely. "While Zephyra was always the dreamer in the family," she said, glass raised, "I always knew she would eventually find her way. Some people take longer to figure out their path, and that's okay. I'm just so happy she finally found Logan to give her the stability she needs." The backhanded compliments continued, each one framed as loving concern. "Zephyra's artwork has always been interesting. Not everyone understands it, but that's the beauty of art, isn't it? It doesn't have to appeal to everyone." By the time she concluded, my jaw hurt from maintaining a fixed smile. Logan squeezed my hand under the table, his touch grounding me and preventing me from saying something I might regret. Later that evening, as guests mingled over dessert, I overheard Jasmine speaking harshly to someone on her phone in the restaurant's back hallway. Her voice, normally carefully modulated to project sweetness, had taken on a sharp, irritated edge. "I know what I'm doing," she hissed. "The wedding is nothing special anyway, just some artsy nonsense in a warehouse. You have nothing to worry about." She noticed me standing there and quickly ended the call. "Just work stuff," she explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know how demanding finance can be." The next day brought more concerning behavior. Logan's best friend Marcus pulled me aside during the brunch for out-of-town guests. "I don't want to add stress before your wedding," he began hesitantly, "but I saw something strange last night. Your sister was being very familiar with Andrew." Andrew was one of Logan's groomsmen, a colleague from his architecture firm. "What do you mean by familiar?" I asked, already dreading the answer. They were in an intense conversation in the parking lot. She had her hand on his arm, standing really close. "When they saw me, they jumped apart like they'd been caught doing something wrong." I thanked Marcus for telling me, unsure what to make of the information. Jasmine had always been flirtatious, but making a play for a groomsman the day before my wedding seemed extreme even for her. Throughout the day, I noticed Jasmine checking her phone constantly, her expression alternating between anxiety and irritation. Whenever someone approached, she would quickly put the phone away and paste on a bright smile. The makeup artist arrived that afternoon for our trial session. After completing my look subtle and elegant, she turned to Jasmine. "What were you thinking for your makeup tomorrow?" she asked. "I'd like something similar to the bride's," Jasmine replied. "After all, we are sisters. We should coordinate." "Actually," the makeup artist said with a professional smile. I usually create a complimentary but distinct look for the maid of honor. It helps the bride stand out in photographs. Oh, no one will have trouble telling us apart, Jasmine said with a laugh that sounded forced. I'll be the pretty one. She said it like a joke, but no one laughed. That evening, Jasmine disappeared for over 3 hours without explanation. She hadn't mentioned any plans, and given her role as maid of honor the day before the wedding, her absence was both surprising and concerning. When she finally returned around midnight, her explanation was vague. Just taking care of some last-minute details, she said airily. Everything needs to be perfect for my big sister's day. When I mentioned her absence to my parents who were staying at a nearby hotel, they immediately defended her. Jasmine has always been so thoughtful, my mother said. I'm sure she was handling something important for the wedding. You should be grateful. The familiar pattern reasserted itself. Jasmine's behavior, no matter how questionable, was given the most charitable interpretation while my concerns were dismissed as oversensitivity or ingratitude. Before going to bed, I noticed Jasmine's purse on the kitchen counter partially open. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but something about her recent behavior had triggered all my childhood instincts that something wasn't right. I glanced inside and saw a receipt from a hotel across town, not where any of our guests were staying, with a large payment for room service dated that day. The next concerning incident came just hours before I was supposed to be getting ready for my wedding. Logan texted me his message, clearly confused. Just got a strange text from Jasmine asking to meet privately before the ceremony to discuss something important about our future. Any idea what that's about? I had no explanation, only a growing sense of dread. What was Jasmine planning? Our wedding coordinator added to my concerns when she mentioned that Jasmine had attempted to make last-minute changes to the seating arrangement, moving several of my closest friends to tables far from the main party. I told her all changes needed your approval, the coordinator assured me. Don't worry, everything is still as you planned it. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and beautiful. Despite the tension with Jasmine, I felt a surge of happiness. In a few hours, I would marry the man who truly saw and appreciated me. Nothing else mattered. That feeling lasted until Jasmine arrived at the bridal suite 45 minutes late for hair and makeup, throwing off the carefully planned schedule. Traffic was terrible, she explained breezily, though other bridesmaids who had taken the same route arrived on time. Don't worry, I'm here now. Let the real fun begin. As she settled into the makeup chair, I noticed something odd about her expression. Beneath the typical Jasmine bravado, she seemed almost afraid. Her smile appeared fixed, and her eyes darted nervously around the room. When her phone chimed with a message, she nearly jumped out of her seat to check it. Everything okay? I asked. Perfect. She replied the word brittle as thin ice. Absolutely perfect. I didn't believe her for a second, but with only hours until the ceremony, I pushed my concerns aside. Whatever game Jasmine was playing would have to wait. Today was about Logan and me, about the life we were building together. I refused to let family drama overshadow that. As I slipped into my wedding dress, surrounded by my closest friends and my increasingly agitated sister, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what happened, I would not allow old patterns to dictate my response. Today, I would stand fully in my own power, the disappointed daughter no more. The ceremony was everything Logan and I had dreamed it would be. The converted warehouse space had been transformed with suspended paper lanterns, projected light patterns that mirrored my artwork, and simple arrangements of local wildflowers. String musicians played an arrangement of our favorite song as I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. For once, my father seemed fully present with me. "You look beautiful, Zephyra," he whispered as we approached the altar where Logan waited. Something in his voice, a catch of emotion, perhaps even regret, made me glance up at him. He squeezed my arm gently, a wordless acknowledgement that carried more meaning than any speech could have. Logan's face as he saw me approaching is a memory I will treasure forever. Pure love, admiration, and joy illuminated his features. In that moment, all the years of feeling second best, of being the disappointing daughter, melted away. Here was a man who chose me exactly as I am. The officiant, a close friend from art school, had worked with us to create a ceremony that reflected our values and relationship. When she spoke about honesty and faithfulness as foundations of marriage, I noticed Jasmine shift uncomfortably beside me, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance, rather than on us. Marriage requires us to be authentic with one another, our friend continued. To present our true selves, not an idealized version that cannot be sustained. Jasmine's fidgeting increased, her knuckles white around the small bouquet she held. Something was definitely wrong, but in the midst of my own vows, I could only register her discomfort peripherally. Logan and I exchanged rings and promises, sealing our commitment with a kiss as our guests applauded. As we turned to face our friends and family as a married couple, I caught a glimpse of my mother wiping away tears. Actual tears, not the performative emotion she usually displayed at Jasmine's achievements. The cocktail hour passed in a blur of congratulations and photographs. Jasmine performed her maid of honor duties mechanically, her smile never reaching her eyes, her attention clearly elsewhere. Several times I noticed her checking the entrance to the venue as though expecting someone. The reception began beautifully. Logan and I shared our first dance to a jazz standard performed live by the quartet we had hired. The space looked magical as the setting sun cast golden light through the massive windows, illuminating the exposed brick walls and turning the simple floral arrangements into glowing sculptures. My father's toast was surprisingly heartfelt. He spoke about watching me grow into an independent woman with a clear vision for my life. While I may not have always understood Zephira's choices, he admitted, today I can see how those choices have led her to happiness and fulfillment. It wasn't quite an apology for years of favoritism, but it felt like the beginning of recognition. However, he couldn't seem to help himself from adding, Jasmine has been such a help with the wedding planning. We're lucky to have such a thoughtful, organized daughter to make sure everything went smoothly. I caught Logan's eye across the table, and we shared a small smile. Some patterns were too ingrained to break in a single day. Dinner had just been served when I noticed a commotion near the entrance to the reception. A woman I didn't recognize was speaking animatedly with one of the venue staff, gesturing toward our celebration. She was strikingly beautiful, with dark hair cut in a sleek bob and wearing a tailored pantsuit that suggested professional success. The venue manager approached our table looking uncomfortable. I'm sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Matheson, but there's someone here asking to speak with Jasmine Bradley urgently. She says it's an emergency. Before I could respond, Jasmine stood abruptly, her face draining of color. I'll handle this, she said, her voice tight. Please continue with dinner. But the unknown woman had already entered the reception area and was making her way directly toward our table, determination in every step. Jasmine, she called loud enough for nearby guests to turn and stare. We need to talk, now. Jasmine froze, looking trapped. Eliza, please, she hissed. Not here. My parents exchanged confused glances. Who is that? My mother asked, straightening her posture as she always did when concerned about appearances. Eliza reached our table, her gaze fixed on Jasmine with an intensity that suggested this was no casual acquaintance. 3 years, Jazz, she said, her voice breaking slightly. 3 years together, and you couldn't tell your family about me, about us. A shocked silence fell over our table. My father recovered first. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Jasmine, who is this woman? Eliza turned to my parents, her expression shifting from hurt to disbelief. You must be Mr. and Mrs. Bradley. I'm Eliza Chen. I'm your daughter's partner. Or at least I thought I was until I discovered she's been lying to me about literally everything. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Jasmine, always the perfect daughter, always following the conventional path to success that our parents valued, had been hiding a core truth about herself. Partner, my mother repeated faintly. But Jasmine has been dating Vincent from her firm. She's brought him to dinner several times. Eliza gave a bitter laugh. Vincent is her co-worker's brother who agreed to play boyfriend for family events. He's happily married to his husband, by the way. Did she mention that part? My parents looked shell-shocked. Jasmine remained frozen, her perfect facade crumbling before our eyes. I could have accepted that you weren't ready to come out to your family, Eliza continued, addressing Jasmine directly. What I can't accept is discovering that everything else you've told me is a lie, too. By now, nearby guests were openly staring conversation at surrounding tables dying away as the drama unfolded. I should have been upset about the disruption to our reception, but instead I felt a strange sense of validation. The golden child's pedestal was finally cracking. "What do you mean, everything else?" my father asked, his face flushed with confusion and anger. Eliza turned to him, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. "Let's start with the basics. Jasmine doesn't work at Morgan Stanley. She lost that job over a year ago after the firm discovered discrepancies in her resume." "That's not true." Jasmine finally spoke, her voice thin and desperate. "Eliza is confused. We should discuss this privately." "I found the termination letter when I was looking for a document in your home office," Eliza countered, "along with bank statements showing massive debt and notices from a landlord threatening eviction for unpaid rent." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. "But Jasmine sends us photos of her office all the time. She talks about her clients, her projects." "Stock photos," Eliza said flatly, "and stories she invents based on financial news. She's been working as an administrative assistant at a small insurance office, using the rest of her time to maintain this elaborate fiction." Each revelation hit like another crack in the foundation of my parents' worldview. The golden child, the perfect daughter, the one who had done everything right, it had all been an illusion, carefully constructed and maintained. "And the Cornell degree?" my father asked, his voice barely audible. Eliza's expression softened slightly, recognizing the pain her words were causing. "She attended for a year and a half before being asked to leave due to a cheating scandal. The rest was fabricated." A collective gasp went through the now silent reception. My parents looked physically ill, decades of pride and certainty dissolving before their eyes. Jasmine, who had remained frozen in place throughout Eliza's revelations, suddenly seemed to collapse in on herself. The perfect posture, the controlled expressions, the carefully modulated voice, all gave way to something raw and desperate. "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face and ruining her perfect makeup. "None of you understand what it's like to be the golden child. Do you know what happens when you're put on a pedestal? There's nowhere to go but down." She turned to our parents, years of hidden resentment breaking through. "You put so much pressure on me to be perfect that I couldn't tell you when I failed. I couldn't tell you when I fell in love with a woman instead of the man you expected. I couldn't tell you anything real because you never wanted the real me. You wanted the perfect daughter you could brag about." Then she turned to me, her expression a complex mixture of resentment and remorse. "And you, Zephyra, you think it was easy being the favorite? Every accomplishment had to be bigger than the last. Every success had to be perfect. While you got to be the disappointment, I had to be extraordinary just to maintain the status quo." "So you lied," I said quietly. "About everything." "Not at first," she admitted. "At first, I really was the golden child. But then I started to crack under the pressure. The cheating at Cornell was just the beginning. After that, it was easier to lie than to admit I wasn't who everyone thought I was. Why try to sabotage my wedding? I asked the question that had been building since I first sensed something wrong. Jasmine looked genuinely ashamed. "Because seeing you so happy, so authentic, it made me realize what a lie my life had become. You found someone who loves the real you. You built a career doing what you love. You're living truthfully, while I've been suffocating under layers of deception." She paused, her voice breaking. "I guess part of me wanted to prove that your happiness wasn't real either." My father, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally spoke. "All those achievements we celebrated, all those accomplishments we bragged about to friends and family." "Lies," Jasmine confirmed, her shoulders slumping. "I'm not vice president of anything. I don't have a corner office. I barely make enough to cover my rent, and most of my designer clothes are knockoffs or bought on credit cards I can't pay off." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, without warning, my father, always so composed, so certain of his place in the world, and his daughter's places in it, put his head in his hands and began to sob. Not quiet, dignified tears, but body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from some deep, broken place inside him. "My golden child," he kept repeating between sobs. "My golden child." My mother, paralyzed by shock, simply stared at Jasmine as though seeing a stranger. The perfect family narrative that had shaped our entire lives had shattered beyond repair. Jasmine, unable to face the devastation she had caused, fled the reception. Eliza, after a moment's hesitation and a whispered apology to me, followed her out. The wedding reception continued in a subdued fashion. Our friends, sensing the gravity of what had occurred, created a protective bubble around Logan and me, filling the dance floor with enough energy to dispel some of the tension. My parents remained at their table, shell-shocked and silent. Occasionally, one of them would look up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something like recognition, as though truly seeing me for the first time. As Logan and I swayed together during a quiet moment on the dance floor, he held me close and whispered, "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully before answering. "I think I am," I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in my life, I'm not being compared to a perfect sister, because she never existed. Logan kissed my forehead gently. "The real you has always been extraordinary enough." In that moment, surrounded by genuine love and freed from the shadow of an impossible standard, I felt a weight lift that I had carried for as long as I could remember. The disappointed daughter and the golden child, both labels, had been illusions, constructs that had limited us both in different but equally damaging ways. Our wedding day had become something neither Logan nor I could have anticipated, the day when truth finally shattered the golden facade, leaving something messier but infinitely more real in its place. Logan and I spent 2 weeks in Portugal for our honeymoon, deliberately disconnecting from family drama to focus on beginning our marriage in joy rather than turmoil. Sandy beaches, medieval villages, and evenings spent sampling local wine provided the perfect buffer between the wedding day revelations and the reality we would have to face upon our return. As much as I tried to stay present in these perfect moments with Logan, questions kept surfacing. Had I truly known my sister at all? Had my parents' favoritism pushed her to create an entirely fictional life? Was there any way forward for our fractured family? When we finally returned to Chicago, the emotional aftermath awaited us. My parents had checked into a hotel after the wedding, rather than returning immediately to Savannah, seemingly unable to face their community with the truth about their golden child freshly revealed. Our first meeting took place in a quiet corner of a hotel restaurant. My father, always impeccably dressed and commanding in presence, looked diminished somehow. The confident posture was gone, replaced by stooped shoulders and a hesitancy in his movements that bordered on frailty. My mother, by contrast, had doubled down on appearances. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup perfect, her outfit coordinated as though she were attending a country club luncheon rather than a painful family discussion. But the strain showed in the tightness around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she arranged and rearranged her silverware. "Have you heard from Jasmine?" I asked after uncomfortable pleasantries had been exchanged. "She's staying with a friend in Boston," my father replied, his voice lacking its usual authority. "She says she needs time to sort things out." What he didn't say, but what hung in the air between us, was the unspoken question: how do we move forward from this? How do we rebuild a family narrative when the central character has been revealed as fiction? "I want to apologize," my father said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even him. "I've been thinking about nothing else since the wedding. The way we treated you, the constant comparisons, it wasn't fair." The apology I had waited for my entire life had finally arrived, prompted not by recognition of my worth, but by the revelation of Jasmine's deception. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. "We always thought Jasmine was the successful one," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The one who had it all figured out. We pushed you to be more like her when all along she was creating a fiction to please you," I finished for him, "because being perfect was the only way to maintain your approval." My mother, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "I don't understand why she felt she needed to lie. We would have loved her no matter what." The statement was so disconnected from reality that I couldn't help but laugh, a short, incredulous sound that caused both my parents to look at me in surprise. Would you, I challenged, would you have loved her if she had told you she was failing classes, if she had told you she was in love with a woman, if she had pursued a creative career instead of finance? Because you certainly never showed that kind of unconditional acceptance to me. My mother's face flushed. That's different. You were always so resistant to guidance. I was authentic, I corrected her. I showed you who I really was, and you made it clear that person wasn't enough. My father surprised me by nodding slowly. You're right, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. We measured both of you against our own narrow definition of success. Jasmine seemed to meet it, so we praised her. You challenged it, so we pushed back. And look where that got us, I said, not unkindly. One daughter living a complete lie until it destroyed her, and another daughter who had to leave home to find acceptance. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. Finally, my father reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture so unexpected that I nearly pulled away. I'm proud of you, Zephyra, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not because of who your husband is or what your career has become, but because you had the courage to be yourself even when we gave you every reason not to be. That kind of authenticity, it's rare and valuable. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Thank you, I managed. But I'm not the only one who deserves to hear that. He nodded, understanding immediately that I meant Jasmine. We've tried calling her, but she won't answer. I think she's ashamed to face us. Or afraid, I suggested. Afraid that without the perfect facade, you won't love her anymore. My mother looked stricken. Of course we still love her. She's our daughter. Then you need to tell her that, I said firmly. Not the fictional daughter you thought you had, but the real Jasmine with all her flaws and struggles, and yes, her sexuality too. The conversation shifted then to practical matters. My parents' plans to return to Savannah, the need for family counseling, tentative steps toward rebuilding relationships on more authentic foundations. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Decades of dysfunction couldn't be solved in a single conversation, but it felt like the beginning of something new. In the months that followed, my parents began therapy, first individually, and then as a couple. My father embraced the process more readily than my mother, who continued to struggle with the loss of the family image she had cultivated so carefully. But gradually, small changes emerged. My father called regularly, asking genuine questions about my art and my life. My mother made efforts, though often awkward ones, to connect without criticizing. Jasmine's journey was more complicated. After the wedding, she moved across the country to Seattle, putting physical distance between herself and the wreckage of her carefully constructed fiction. She cut contact with our parents for nearly 3 months, responding to their messages with only brief texts confirming she was alive and safe. My relationship with Jasmine existed in a strange limbo. The rivalry that had defined our childhood had evaporated, replaced by something undefined and tentative. We exchanged occasional messages, careful and polite, neither of us quite ready to address the elephant in the room. For myself, I found healing through various channels. Logan's unwavering support provided a foundation of security I had never experienced in my family of origin. His parents continued to embrace me fully, modeling what healthy family dynamics could look like. I also began therapy, working through the complex emotions that had surfaced after years of suppression: anger at my parents' favoritism, compassion for Jasmine's impossible position as the golden child, grief for the supportive family I never had, and determination to break these patterns if Logan and I ever had children of our own. Perhaps most significantly, I channeled these emotions into my art. I began a series exploring family dynamics, creating abstract compositions that captured the tension between authenticity and expectation, between conditional and unconditional love. The work was raw, vulnerable, and deeply personal, and it resonated with viewers in a way my previous work hadn't. A year after the wedding, the series was featured in a prominent Chicago gallery. The opening night reception coincided with my father's business trip to the city, and to my surprise, he attended. I watched from across the gallery as he moved slowly from piece to piece, spending time with each one, his expression thoughtful and sometimes pained. When he reached the central work, a large canvas titled Golden Cage that abstractly depicted the gilded prison of perfectionism, he stood motionless for so long that I finally approached him. "What do you think?" I asked quietly. He turned to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "It's extraordinary," he said simply. "I see both of you in this. Both of my daughters trapped in different ways by the same impossible standards." School, it was the first genuinely appreciative comment he had ever made about my art, and the fact that it came from a place of real understanding, rather than obligatory support, made it all the more meaningful. "I'm proud of you, Zephyra," he continued. "Not just of your success, but of who you are, your authenticity, your resilience. I should have seen those qualities for what they were long ago." The words I had longed to hear my entire life finally came, not because I had changed to meet his expectations, but because he had changed to recognize my value as I was. That same month, Jasmine and I had our first real conversation via video call. She looked different. Her carefully maintained highlights, grown out her makeup minimal, her designer clothes replaced by a simple sweater. "I like your new work," she said after we exchanged awkward greetings. "The gallery sent me the digital catalog." "Thank you," I replied. "How are you doing, really?" She considered the question with a thoughtfulness I wasn't used to seeing from her. "I'm rebuilding," she said finally. "Starting from scratch. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time." She had found a job as an administrative assistant at a small environmental nonprofit work that she described as honest. She was sharing an apartment with 2 roommates living within her actual means for the first time in years. She and Eliza had ended their relationship. Too much damage had been done by the lies, but they were cautiously rebuilding a friendship. "The hardest part," she admitted, "is learning who I actually am when I'm not trying to be perfect. For so long, my entire identity was wrapped up in being the golden child. Without that, I'm not sure who's left." "I know exactly how that feels," I told her. "I spent years trying to figure out who I was apart from being the disappointing daughter." A sad smile crossed her face. "We were both trapped in our own ways, weren't we? You in my shadow, me on that pedestal. Neither of us could just be ourselves," I agreed. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, the words bursting out as though she'd been holding them back. "For everything, for the wedding sabotage attempts, for the years of condescension, for letting them use me as a weapon against you." "I'm sorry too," I replied, surprising myself. "For sometimes resenting you when you were just playing the role they created for you. For not seeing how much pressure you were under. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. We had years of complicated history to work through, but it was a beginning. A recognition that beneath the labels of golden child and disappointing daughter were 2 sisters who had both been damaged by impossible expectations, just in different ways." As I hung up, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected. The family I had grown up in would never be the hallmark perfect unit I had sometimes enviously imagined as a child. We were messy, complicated, damaged in places. But perhaps there was room for something new to grow in the space created by shattered illusions, something imperfect but authentic. I turned back to my studio, where a new canvas awaited. On it, I had sketched the preliminary outline of 2 female figures different in form, but connected neither in the other's shadow, neither on a pedestal. Sisters simply existing as themselves. The golden child label wasn't a crown for my sister, it was a cage. And my disappointment label wasn't a failure, it was freedom to become who I truly am. Have you ever been labeled in your family or felt overshadowed by a sibling? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about family dynamics and finding your own path. Remember, sometimes the labels that hurt us most are the ones that eventually set us free. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some comfort to anyone who has ever felt like they weren't enough just as they are.